Serena Williams, one of the world's most successful female tennis players, is constantly denigrated for not being feminine enough. Her body has been dissected in countless articles, the size of her buttocks, her muscular arms and legs, and she has been accused of using performance-enhancing drugs. She and her sister Venus have been mocked as the Williams brothers. When other women players were asked if they were willing to become more muscular to improve their tennis game, many said no, insisting they wanted to still look like women. The glaring implication being that the Williams sisters' strength makes them unwomanly. Williams isn't alone. In the United States, Black women have often been deemed too ugly, muscular, and aggressive to be feminine. Even Michelle Obama, throughout her husband's presidency, was subjected to bizarre internet conspiracies that she's a man. Says Simidi Discus, a media and cultural studies lecturer at the University of Sussex. I want to let y'all know I pronounced that name completely wrong, but we move! In this context, it's perhaps unsurprising that Black women have a different relationship to femininity than white women. Pew Research Center, or Pew, again, we move, highlighted this difference in a recent study on the role of men and women in the U.S. society. Overall, 32% of women surveyed described themselves as very feminine. But when the data was broken down by race, it showed that Black women were most likely to see themselves as very feminine. 46% described themselves as such, followed by 42% of Hispanic women and 27% of white women. So, even though Black women in America are most often seen as not very feminine, not afforded femininity, right, or womanness, or softness, when surveyed, 46% of Black women describe themselves as very feminine. American Black women aren't just more likely to identify as feminine, research shows they are also more likely to embrace feminism. This was highlighted in a 2007 study that found that Black women were more interested in traditionally feminine behaviors such as wearing attractive clothing than their white counterparts, and also were more likely to describe themselves as feminists. The researchers point to decades of previous studies showing that Black women tend to identify as feminists more than white women. The paper's author suggests that this is due to Black women's experience of racial oppression in the United States, which they argue sensitizes them to the issues of sexism. Interestingly, researchers found that for Black women, placing a high level of importance on wearing feminine clothes was a significant positive predicator of feminism, while for white women, it was a negative predicator of feminism. In a separate 2002 study on Black parents, a Black mom said she was teaching her 11-year-old daughter to be both a warrior for racial justice and to act like a lady by carrying herself well. It doesn't surprise me because for Black women, idea of femininity was out of reach for so long, says Lauren Fannin, who researches the intersection of race, gender, and class at Georgia State University. Ideas of femininity and masculinity are based on the images of whites, Fannin says. Like Black men, enslaved Black women were dehumanized. Women slaves were raped, had their children ripped away from them and sold, and toiled in the fields alongside men. Stereotypes of Black women, that they were loud, lewd, rude, ugly, barbaric, and sexually promiscuous, were used to justify the atrocities committed against them. Many of these stereotypes continue to plague Black women today. Embracing femininity is a way to resist those stereotypes, Fannin says. In a society that has deemed Black women incapable of being vulnerable, warm, beautiful, and graceful, it can be powerful to choose to identify as women, says Adia Harvey Wingfield, professor of sociology at Washington University in St. Louis, citing examples such as the natural hair movement. The idea of Black women embracing aspects of their natural beauty very much is still a radical act, she says. Of course, embracing femininity is not necessarily a distraction from feminist organizing. Historically, it has been complicated, and historically, it has also complemented it. Fannin points to the Black Women's Club movement, which began in the 1890s as an offshoot from the White Women's Club movement. Now, before we continue, what exactly was the Black Women's Club movement? Well, in the 1890s, the growth of the Black Women's Club movement was spurred by efforts to end lynching. Ida B. Wells Barnett denounced lynching in the press. As she traveled the country lecturing about lynching, she also helped to found Black women's clubs. Many of these clubs addressed problems similar to those addressed by white women's clubs, including health, sanitation, education, and women's suffrage. However, Black women clubs also focused on combating racism and on racial uplift. In 1896, Black women's clubs joined together to form the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs under the leadership of Mary Church Terrell. The motto of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs was "Lifting as We Climb." One of the most effective Black women's clubs was the Neighborhood Union in Atlanta, run by Lugenia Burns Hope. The Neighborhood Union divided the city into districts and zones, thus effectively reaching almost every Black American in Atlanta. Black women also founded mutual benefit societies, settlement houses, and schools. Some Black female workers, particularly laundresses in the South, made efforts to unionize and undertook strikes. Black women in the North also worked to provide services for Black women recently arrived from the South. The National League for the Protection of Colored Women, which later merged with the organizations to form the National Urban League and colored chapters of the WYCA, offered services to female migrants. Black women were involved in the formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and performed much of the local work. Notable Black women reformers include Mary McLeod Bethune, who founded the National Council of Negro Women, which I am a proud member of, the Southeastern Federation of Colored Women's Club, and the Bethune-Cookman Institute. Nanny Helen Burroughs, who founded the National Training School for Women and Colors and Girls in Washington, D.C., and Maggie Lena Walker, the first American Woman Bank president. The first American woman bank president, not the first Black woman, the first American woman bank president, who was also head of one of the largest and most successful Black mutual benefit societies. I hope you enjoyed the history lesson. While the latter focused primarily on social and educational gatherings for middle-class white women, white women's clubs, members of the Black women's clubs movement were also civil rights activists, as we all have just learned. Fannin says these women were largely a part of the Black middle class, were devoted to their femininity and their family. Their attire and sense of self very much challenged the perceptions of Black women at the time. They were also very politically and socially active, Fannin says. The Black Women's Club movement fought for the right to vote, organized anti-lynching campaigns, and worked on getting better access to education for their community. In contrast, white women have historically been the default when it comes to mainstream cultural ideas of what femininity is and what it looks like. Wingfield says, adding that white women don't have to assert it or even think about being defined or seen as feminine, while Black women embrace femininity to overcome a dehumanization that can be traced back to slavery in the United States. White women's disavowal of femininity is rooted in second wave feminism, which sprang up in the early 1960s and focused on challenging gender roles in the family and workplace as well as reproductive rights. As a result, the way we understand femininity between Black and white women is similar, Fannin says, but the way we respond to it and embrace is different. Fannin said she was critical of the idea of white women halfway rejecting their privilege while still benefiting from it. It's one thing for a white woman to not identify with femininity, but it's another to try to deconstruct in a way that all women of color can benefit, Fannin adds. And while the Black feminist struggle hasn't excluded femininity, it can only do so much, Desekin adds. Femininity and the notions of beauty it entails is important for Black women's sense of self and sense of value. But Black women still need to continue to fight to broaden the movement to ensure it is inclusive and welcoming of those who are not interested in defining themselves as feminine. You have to balance those two things, Desekin says. So, this article, available on Quartz, for Black women, femininity and feminism are not mutually exclusive, was a really interesting one. So, as you know, okay, so it's that last paragraph for me, right? That says how, Black women and their feminist movement need to make sure that we are broadening it so it's inclusive of those who do not want to describe themselves as feminine. And I am here for it. I do agree with it. But again, why do Black women gotta do everything? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to do everything? Because for so long, white feminism in general, did not include Black women, one, and definitely did not include or make space for women or people who identify as being women, but who didn't want to identify being feminine. Like, white feminism and feminism in general did not make space for those people, right? It was like, nope, either you're this or you're that or you're out. And so to ask Black women to do it, again, it's kind of like, whoa, y'all ask us to do everything. Like, must we save the world? Or can we just focus on saving ourselves? Like, can we just focus on making space for ourselves? And that's what the last paragraph had me think about. Not that I disagree with what it's saying, but it made me think about how often Black women are really, literally asked to do everything. And I don't feel like we're ever truly given the space to just think about ourselves. And when Black women do make spaces exclusively for ourselves, people cry and scream and yell and throw a tantrum over the fact that they are not being included, that they are being excluded. And it's like, no, Black women are allowed to have spaces for Black women and Black women only. We're also allowed to have movements for Black women and Black women only. First of all, for so long, everyone had movements only for themselves and we weren't included. And then when we started doing our own movements, it's like y'all didn't care because, again, we still weren't included in your movements. Now that there is this sort of upward mobility that Black women have gained, and we're amongst the highest educated, and we're amongst the top earners, and we're beating all these records. Now everybody want to get in the club and be in the section with Black women. And it's like, no, you weren't invited. You can't get in the section. You're not on the list. Like, accept it. You should have thought about that when you didn't let us in the club, even though we built the club. How about that? Let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just all very interesting. So that's what the very last paragraph made me think about. Like, Black women are asked to do everything. And when we say no, it's a problem. But it's like, when we were asking you to make space for us, you told us no. And we said, fine, we'll make our own space. Now you want to get into our spaces. For why? Why can't the benefits that Black women receive from our hard work just be for us? That's just a little question I have, just a little question that I have. But yeah, Black women are always having to, I feel like, exist in this sort of, like double consciousness of, what the woman said, like she's raising her war in the article. The woman Black woman spoke about raising her daughter to be a warrior, right, for the race, for Black people, but also be a feminine woman, right, and know how to carry herself well and dress well. And it's just like, damn, so I got to be a warrior and I got to be a princess. Like, and it's not that the little girl can't be both, but it's just like, I'm a little girl right now. Like, I'm 11. Like, she's talking about raising up and training her 11-year-old daughter to be a warrior for the race, but also to be this ultra feminine princess. And I'm not blaming or passing judgment on the mother at all, because I understand where it's coming from. I get it. She knows how the world's going to look at her daughter, and she doesn't want her daughter to be read as being too militant or too aggressive or, gosh darn dare it, too masculine. She doesn't want her daughter to think that she can only be one or the other. But it's also just like, is that something an 11-year-old needs to be worried about? And again, see how that's like not something little white girls have to worry about ever? Like, little white girls get to just be little white girls. They don't ever have to worry about being a champion for their race, right? When they go to school, it doesn't matter how they're dressed, because that's just Rebecca, like Rebecca dresses how Rebecca dresses. But when it comes to the little Black girl, how she dresses is not only representative of her home, of her parents, or of herself, it's representative of the whole entire race. And it's like, that's not right. Like, That's not fair. This little black girl shouldn't, how she carries herself and her femininity should not be representative of the whole entire race. It should be representative of her, but not all of us. But that's what society does to little black children, to little black girls, to black women. And it's super, super frustrating, which is why I do love that the article is titled for black women, Femininity and Feminism are not mutually exclusive, because it's true. How black women are expressing our femininity versus our politics, our feminist politics, they're not mutually exclusive. They are not the same thing. And more than often, I feel like black women also have to overplay, have to dramatize their performance of femininity, right? And a lot of times, sometimes or usually I would argue, conflicts with their actual feminist beliefs or politics, because the world is not going to see them as feminine. So it's like, I have to do this to the extreme. I have to have the most soft, palatable costume of femininity on. Otherwise, people won't receive my messages, right, when it comes to my feminist politics, the same way. I have to dress it up, where it's like the white woman doesn't have to do that. She can be in the combat boots and the grunge jeans and the t-shirt. I'm just providing an example. I'm not saying that's how they all look. Just understand the examples for understanding's sake. So I'm going to use very simple, examples, okay? So she can wear the grunge jeans. She can wear the Doc Martens. She can wear the white t-shirt and have the buzz cut or long hair or whatever, right? And people will still receive the message probably better than they would from a black woman dressed in the same way. So the black woman goes, okay, let me put on the wig, let me make sure the lace is undetectable. Like, what lace? It's giving scalp. Let me make sure my makeup is done. Let me make sure I'm contoured. So let's get those Eurocentric features poppington through the art of makeup, right? Let's make sure the dress fits, the corset is on, the shapewear is on, the booty is lifted. Let's make sure I have my hourglass shape on point, heels up, booty tooted up, right? Let me make sure I look like the most banging thing out here, and then let me go in with my politics, because now they might hear the message. And it's like, damn, you gotta do all of that just to get your message across. That's horrible. And it's not horrible, you know what I'm saying? It's horrible that, like, you have to do all of that. It's not horrible that you might like to dress in that way, but it's just like a lot of women also may not like it, and they're having problems with costume. I know for myself, with my femininity, and I've talked about it in a couple of videos, probably in most of my videos about black women and luxury and black women's femininity and soft black girls, right? That even when it comes to my own femininity, I kind of struggle with the way in which I want to present it to the world. I struggle with what costume I want to put on, right? Because we're all wearing a costume. Let's be honest. Stop it. When you're in your house, you don't look how you look outside. So it's a costume. And I kind of struggle with the way that I want to present it to the world, because I'm just like, ugh. Simply because I am dark-skinned, no matter what I do, it will be read a certain way. So it's like, in what way do I want to be read most often? Because I know that 9 times out of 10, no matter how someone is reading me, they're reading me wrong. They're reading me wrong, right? They're taking what they've gotten from how they've been socialized and how they've been programmed through media. I get that. So now I'm looking at how media is programming people to read me, and now I have to kind of pick out what character I want to be for the day, because I need to figure out, well, how do I need to be read to get across whatever message? And it's just something that other people just don't really have to think about. And that's wild, because I also have realized too, like, my womanist politics really do conflict with my presentation of being a woman or being feminine. And it's weird. It makes me feel weird. It makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes. But it's just like, I am figuring out the best way to combat these really horrible stereotypes about women that look like me, not only combating it out to the world, but also combating with myself, right? Like, I am presenting to myself an image that is comfortable and reads as feminine to me, but also reads as feminine to the world. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I apologize if it sounds like I'm kind of talking in circles, because I am also now starting to have new thoughts in my mind about that presentation of self, about that costume I'm wearing outside every time I get dressed. And it's just interesting. And colorism, featureism, texturism. It's all interesting, right? I am at the intersection of all those things. I'm a very monoracial, Black presenting person. So I have to work doubly, triply, quadruply as hard as my Black peers who don't present that way. And I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get over that. You know, we have to get over that. We have to all at some point admit that, like, there are a lot of things working to make us feel really bad about ourselves and to even make us feel in conflict with our own theory and politic. And now there's a part of me that's starting to think about, like, dang, is my femininity and my feminism, even at conflict with each other? Or do I just feel like they're at conflict with each other due to programming, due to media training, right? Is that why I feel like they're at conflict with each other? So there's some food for thought for you all. I hope you also enjoy today's reading of this article. Of course, everything will be linked down below so you can read it for yourself and follow along at the same time. Listen back to this video, or just so you can read it and get your own like thoughts and opinions moving. But yeah, you know, it's interesting. I also thought it was really wild too, like how in that study that Black women considered themselves very feminine more than Hispanic women, white women, Asian women, like more than every other woman that they surveyed. Like that shows you the reprogramming and reconditioning that we're doing for ourselves. I think that's actually a really good sign. Me personally, I think that's a really good sign that 47% of Black women considered themselves very feminine. And I'm sure that that 47% of Black women are very aware, right, of how media is, you know, saying Black women appear or what our femininity is. And those Black women are like, I see that, I get that, totally understand all of it. I don't consider myself that though, but I do consider myself very feminine. I love that. I really, really love that. And, you know, we have a long ways to go. You know, we have a really long ways to go with what it means to be a Black woman, what it even means to be Black, what it is to be a woman. Like a lot of things are being redefined. Okay, message. But a lot of things are being redefined, and a lot of things were never defined, right? So Black women now are in that space where we're having to get very clear about what it means to be this, what it means to be that, what it looks like for us. Generally, obviously, there's always outliers. And obviously, every human being is their own person. So you're going to have your own understanding of it. But you know, the vast majority, right? How are the vast majority of us leaning into feminism? How are the vast majority of us leaning into womanism? How is the vast majority of us leaning into our femininity? What does that mean? Because Black women have never been given femininity. That's never been associated with us. And now it's 2021, It's 2021. And we're only really just starting to have these discussions. Because even all your old Hollywood movies, right, of your Diane Carols, right, your Eartha Kitts, right, of your, you know, very feminine Black women, the undertone there was always giving very much Jezebel spirit. And like, it was always giving very much Hottentot Venus. Like, and it's like, see, we want that Diane Carroll old Hollywood glamour without the undertone of the Jezebel spirit. Like, without the undertone of the Hottentot Venus. Like, without the undertone of the promiscuous exotic. Like, see, I don't want it in every single film. Like, if it's pushing the narrative along, cool. But a lot of times it was doing nothing to push the narrative along. They were just throwing that in there to condition you, right? To program you to go, okay, the Black woman is presenting herself in this all gussied up, beautiful way. She must want something, you know? Like, she must be trying to get something. She's trying to place herself in a box in which she doesn't belong. That was always the undertone. And I don't like it. I do not like that because, again, it's saying Black women cannot present themselves in this way and have it be genuine. It's always for, some devious motives. So we have to address that because it's important. And I think what the soft Black girl movement is doing right now is attempting to address that. Like, hey. Some of us just like to dress that way. Some of us just like to look that way. Some of us just like to present ourselves in that way. Right? And over here, you're not going to find the Jezebel spirit. Over here, you're not going to find the Hottentot Venus. Over here, you're not going to find the exotic, the promiscuous exotic. That's not what you're going to find over here. You're going to find a Black woman, right? You're just going to find a Black girl who dresses in this way, who presents herself in this way, who speaks in this way, who's interested in these things, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're going to find, right? Because stop coming over here and expecting something that is, other to what it is I'm actually presenting to you. So it's deep, y'all. It gets really, really deep. But this is the second video in this little series, this essay series of reading articles and responding. So I do hope you enjoyed today's. Obviously, all sources will be linked down below. And thank you for joining me again.